Now, the BuckeyeXtra podcast with Rob Aller, Bill Rabinowitz, and Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Welcome back to the BuckeyeXtra football podcast. I'm Joey Kaufman, joined by Bill Rabinowitz, and at long last, after months of hype and hoopla surrounding the Ohio State football program this summer, it's game week. The Buckeyes are playing in 4 days when Akron comes to Ohio Stadium. So, Bill, we finally get to talk about a real game on the horizon. Training camp is in the rearview mirror. Talking season is over. It's about to be football season.
I thought about this today. How much has changed since the last time we saw Ohio State on the field? I mean, you remember, of course you do, the Cotton Bowl game in Dallas, a dispiriting 14-3 loss to Missouri. Devin Brown's coming out party lasted about a few minutes. Lincoln Kienholz was thrust in. They couldn't do anything. It just was a very depressing end to the season. And then a couple weeks later, Michigan wins the national championship, and it seemed like everything that could go wrong with Ohio State's program was going wrong. And now you look at it 7 months, 8 months later, and how much has changed. I mean, I'm not going to we'll maybe get to Michigan down the road, but later on in this. But, you think about where Ohio State was then and where they are now. They obviously have a new quarterback in Will Howard. They hit the jackpot with him and others in the portal, getting Caleb Downs, Quinshon Judkins, Seth McLaughlin, maybe even Will Kazmir can help them at tight end. They kept, more importantly, almost all of their underclassmen. It could have been an exodus. It was just Marvin Harrison and Michael Hall, and that was it. It could have been all those guys, but they all came back. Obviously, NIL played a role, but they came back also because they wanted to beat Michigan, win a Big Ten, win a national championship, the whole natty or bust thing Denzel Burke talked about. And so you enter this season now, Saturday, with a completely different outlook than I thought we would after that Missouri game.
Yeah, if you said everything went wrong for Ohio State in December, seemingly everything went right for them in January because all the guys where it felt like they could possibly come back, they all came back. They were able to get guys through the transfer portal. Nick Saban's retirement was a huge factor in that because somebody like Caleb Downs stays at Alabama if Nick Saban's the coach there. Julian Sayin, the quarterback of the future, quite possibly, also probably doesn't come. So you look at the way things changed. It's been big for Ohio State. I don't think any program probably in college football was as happy to ring in the new year as Ohio State was in January. Things have gone smoothly for them this the last 8 months, but they crown teams champions in January, not August. So it's with all the anticipation, it'll be good to finally see this team in the flesh and see them play games. Ryan Day kind of mentioned that Will Howard's not played a game for them. Quinshon Judkins hasn't played a game for them. On paper, all these guys look like you can just plug them in, but now here's the opportunity, and we can talk more about this, but they are not getting thrown into the fire right away like 2 years ago where Notre Dame comes to the horseshoe or they have to play Notre Dame in a couple weeks. They get a I think you could say a nice ramp up to the start of the real season. Yeah,
I mean, the first 3 games are not going to be a challenge. It's the first time that they have not played a marquee non-conference opponent in a long time. I mean, well, obviously 2020 is a different kind of year with COVID, but it was Notre Dame the last couple of years. It's been Oklahoma. It's been, you got who's the toughest? Marshall, I guess. I mean, it's no offense to Marshall, but they're not Notre Dame. And so, and then even they open a Big Ten season with Michigan State, which is rebuilding. So, Iowa's the next week, and that Iowa's defense is obviously for real, but their offense should be, somewhat better, but it's not going to be great, I wouldn't think. And then you have, of course, the showdown against Oregon. So you're really not going to know everything that you want to know for another 6 weeks. But that's what the schedule is. So, it's important for Ohio State, as Ryan Day said today, to not think about the opponent, just play to your standard, play to the Ohio State standard. He said he wants to be the hardest playing team in the country. And at this level, you don't coach effort. Effort's a given. And so I fully expect that Ohio State to play very hard. for about 2 quarters before I guess the over under is when do the starters stop playing? When does Ryan Day empty the bench against Akron? I mean, I would guess sometime middle third quarter if things go according to plan, but we'll see.
It's probably a good situation for somebody like Will Howard. He's certainly experienced and well traveled through college football, having made 25 plus starts. He's been in college football since 2020, but first time playing in this offense. It never felt like they really got off the ground offensively last year. And now you get, I think, maybe more of a stretch on the calendar where you can work through the kinks. And that's what they have, I think, going into the end of the year here with Akron.
Last year, they only averaged 30 points a game. That's I think they averaged over 40 in every other year. And that was unacceptable. And
every year and a day.
What's that?
Every year and a day. Just
under day. Yes, I mean every year and a day. And so I fully expect them to be in the 40s this year. And I think on the flip side, I think the defense is going to allow fewer than 10 points a game. It was 11 last year. And you add Caleb Downs, you add all those guys who are coming back. Sonny Styles is probably more a natural linebacker at this stage than safety. So he's that now. I mean, you've got an absolutely loaded defense. There is no weakness on that defense on paper. Now, you still got to play, but if I'm an offensive coordinator, I'm trying to say, okay, I'm going to probe this defense, and where's the weak link? Good luck.
Where did you pick this team to finish in the preseason predictions that we filled out for them? Did you pick them to win a national title?
It's the first time I've ever done that. No, I've never been asked to do it, but I've, radio shows or whatever else, I've been asked to do that. And I've never picked Ohio State to win the national title for the simple reason that it's really, really hard to do it. And I still think if you say, does Ohio State have better than a 50% chance to win a national championship? I'd say no, they don't, because that's really hard to do. But I also thought, okay, who else is better positioned to win it? I mean, Georgia, is number one, and they should be a really good team. They got to go through that SEC minefield. Oregon obviously is number three. Ohio State will play them at least once. I still think Ohio State's a cut above Oregon in overall talent. I mean, they have Dylan Gabriel, and he's a terrific quarterback, but I'll take Ohio State's roster over anybody's. And then you factor in the motivation that this team has. And I don't buy the natty or bust that it's a failure if you don't win a national championship. I think if you beat Michigan and you win the Big Ten and you, let's say, lose in the championship game, it's certainly disappointing. And they won't be satisfied, obviously. But to say that would be a failure, I think would be a stretch.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. Not to, I guess this isn't the best debate fodder, but I also picked them to win a national championship.
So we could be accused of being homers. Again, I've never picked Ohio State to win a national title before. And some of that's because they did have significant questions. And look, they still do. And the offensive line is a question, right? We don't know how well that offensive line is going to play. I think it'll be significantly better. I mean, Josh Simmons, the year under his belt at left tackle, should be much better. Josh Fryer has gotten raves this year. I think Seth McLaughlin at center is going to be an upgrade. So I think it'll be better. And I'm confident in Will Howard. You know what? Tell me if you agree. Just his presence today at the lectern when he just was answering questions. And this is no slam on Kyle McCord, who was perfectly, composed and articulate and everything. He's a sharp guy and handled everything well. But it was the difference between a guy who's going to be 23 soon and a guy who was just kind of feeling his way last year. I thought Will Howard kind of had command of the, he just looks comfortable. He looks like, I've done this. I'm confident. Let's just go. Is that what do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. Certainly has a presence. And you think about the recent run of quarterbacks in this sport who have really benefited from getting the extra COVID year. You have Michael Penix Jr. at Washington, probably the best case example, who led Washington to the national championship game last year, really benefited from having more experience. So I think Will Howard could be this year's example of that. The knock on him, and this will be this remains to be seen is just how good of a downfield passer will he be. There's been plenty of discussion this offseason about him adding a running threat to Ohio State's offense, especially in the red zone, and that is sorely needed for them to try to get some more juice out of the run game. But is he going to be able to fit the ball in a tight windows down the field in a close semifinal game in January? That I think time will only tell that. But that is the when you look at the things that could derail their national championship hopes, you certainly look at the offensive line, and then you look at quarterback, and they put their eggs in Will Howard's basket. They didn't pursue Dylan Gabriel. They talked to him, but they waited to see Devin Brown in the Cotton Bowl. If Gabriel ends up having the better year than Will Howard, I think that'll be a discussion point because Ohio State picked the wrong quarterback. That was certainly a narrative that emerged last year when J.J. McCarthy outdueled Kyle McCord. You looked back on Ryan Day's decision when both of those guys were in the same recruiting class and then favoring McCord over McCarthy. So the same thing could play out this year if for whatever reason you look at the guys in that grouping of Will Howard, of Kyle McCord, who's now at Syracuse, or Dylan Gabriel's at Oregon. Did Ohio State pick the right guy? And we'll see. I think there are a lot of things to like about Will Howard in terms of the moxie that he brings and his running threat. And he's, I think, going to improve a lot playing with the supporting cast at Ohio State and with Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator. So those are the factors that I'd be concerned about Ohio State. But, I mean, I'm with you, Bill. The reason I picked this team to win it all is just because of the defense. I think it should be the best in the country. You look last year, Michigan won it all. They had the best defense in the country. When Georgia won it in 2021, they had the best defense in the country. So this format is different with an expanded playoff, but the team that wins the national championship is, in recent years, been the one that's had the best defense. So I think Ohio State certainly gets the bump from me in that category, and I think it's why they ultimately win it all.
I talked to Dylan Gabriel at Big Ten Media Days, an impressive guy also, but it should be pointed out that it wasn't like Ohio State chose between Will Howard and Dylan Gabriel. I think Dylan Gabriel always wanted to go to Oregon and was probably always going to go to Oregon. But yes, you're right in the sense that Ohio State was not ready to pull the trigger right away anyway. And
right, it was no sure
uphill battle. It would have been an uphill battle for Ohio State to get Dylan Gabriel. They would have had to probably commit to him right away, and I don't think they want to do that for the reasons we talked about.
I think to your point, even if they did commit to Dylan Gabriel right away, it was no sure bet. He very likely could have ended up at Oregon anyway, regardless of however Ohio State wanted to maneuver that situation. Right. But Ohio State, their preference was to wait until after the Cotton Bowl, and that really took themselves out of the running for Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah. I will say this.
And the McCarthy-McCord thing is a little different insofar as if they had gone all in on McCarthy as a high school prospect, he would have ended up at Ohio State because that was where he wanted to play.
I will say this, that if Dylan Gabriel had picked Ohio State, I think Ohio State would be number one in the preseason. I think Dylan Gabriel's that good. Again, not a slap at Will Howard. Will Howard might be exactly what the Buckeyes need this year. But I do think that Gabriel is considered the best quarterback in the portal. And if Ohio State had gotten him, then I think they'd be number one. But number two is fine. And again, none of this is decided now. I think Ohio State's very happy with Will Howard. I think they're very happy with how he has improved in terms of reshaping his body first, and then the way that he has learned the offense and kind of naturally taken command of the team. I mean, you can't come in no matter how many years you played at Kansas State when you got a quarterback competition and be the man right away. You got to earn it. You got to sit back in the room. You got to work hard, shut your mouth, develop relationships, have it happen organically instead of trying to force it. And that's what he's done. He didn't come in like, I'm the guy and follow me. It was first I got to earn the job because it was an open competition. Devin Brown and the others, I mean, less so the freshmen, but it was a competition. It was a real competition. And so Devin Brown Devin Brown didn't handle it the right way too, to be honest, but Will Howard had to handle it the right way. And I think he did. And I've talked to him, and there is a presence about him. Quarterbacks either have it or they don't. It just is the truth that you can talk to a guy and just get a sense of who he is and what kind of leader he is. And Will Howard is a leader. I think if he struggles in a game, he'll get up there and say, hey, I struggled, and be candid about it. I think that if a teammate needs to be, kind of scolded or chastised, I think he would do it. I think his preferred method is encouragement, but I think he'll do whatever it takes. Because look, everything for him is riding on this season. He would have been a late round pick probably if he'd gone in the draft, and Kansas State really wasn't an option for him. I mean, it might have been, but they got their new shiny bright object, Avery Johnson, that they wanted to play at quarterback. So it was either the pros or a place like Ohio State for Will Howard. And so he's got to make the most of this year.
Yeah, he bet on himself that he could improve his draft stock by coming to Ohio State and develop as a downfield passer. And that was part of the calculation for him to improve from being a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick into a day 1 or day 2 pick. So we'll see how that plays off. I think you're right, though, about his presence. And I know it's I don't know how interesting it is in theory or how it sounds, but you do listen to him talk, and it does feel like there's just some moxie there. And they felt
You love that word. You love that word.
It's a good quarterback word. But last year they felt flat on offense. I mean, they were a quiet bunch. Yeah. Day talked about that when he was discussing Brandon Innes at Media Days. He talked about he was somebody you could feel on the field. And we were at Brandon Innes' scrum and middle of training camp, and he talked about sort of the offense needed some more kind of fire at times last year. And I think it's true. They just had a lot of quiet personalities, and I think they could just use some sort of an injection of that sort of enthusiasm to some degree.
I also think that all these guys are now highly, highly motivated. They know that they turned down the NFL. They can improve their draft stock. They want to leave a legacy here at Ohio State. I just think this is going to be kind of a balls to the walls kind of team. And they're going to, as they put it today, leave no doubt. I mean, that's the approach they want to take. They don't want to have it come down to one play or one drive like it did against Michigan last year. They want to just dominate from the start, have it not come down to that. Obviously, other teams are going to say something about that. I mean, Oregon's no pushover. Penn State's no pushover. Michigan obviously is no pushover. You get into the postseason, and that's going to be tough. But I think the mindset for Ohio State is play to our standard. Let's just make a statement every week that this is the best team in the country, that we're going to play to the peak of our ability every week. Now, that's not going to happen. I mean, I think every year, even the best teams have one clunker, and the best teams survive that clunker. And you're not going to play great every week. It's just the reality. But I think that Ohio State has the mindset that they're pissed. I mean, that may be the better word. They're kind of like they're going to play with that chip on their shoulder this year. They're pissed about what happened, losing 3 straight to Michigan. Whether 2 of those wins were the result of some shenanigans that maybe we'll discuss, is a different matter. But the fact is they lost 3 in a row to Michigan, and that's just, I mean, for a program that prides itself on winning that game, it's like living with a cloud.
I think what will be, maybe interesting is to look back. There are 2 seasons that come to mind where it felt like Ohio State was laser focused coming in the end of the year under Ryan Day. It was 2020 after they lost to Clemson in the semifinal, and they were so motivated to get back to the playoff. Ryan Day called that a once-in-a-lifetime team. You had Justin Fields at quarterback. You had some returning experience on defense as well. And they were just locked in on getting back and getting a chance to beat Clemson, and they did. And that game plan was well designed, and they torched Clemson. And then you look at 2022, where they're coming off their first loss to Michigan in 21, and Michigan was the team that was right in the bullseye. And if they got to that stage, and it felt like maybe they were pressing, where they ultimately just were almost too focused or too hyped up, or things just got out of control and they got ahead of themselves. And so this year is sort of like in that same boat where they have that clear objective they are focused in on. And those are 2 blueprints or 2 scenarios for how things have played out. So in terms of the narrative and just the end of season goals, I think it'll be fun to see which at least fun or interesting from our perspective. If you're a Buckeye fan, maybe just you're hold on to the edge of your seat. But I think that those are kind of the way things have gone for Ryan Day, and this situation kind of reminds me of that. Maybe it's an even year thing. I don't know.
I mean, well, the other part of the equation is, if God forbid Ohio State loses to Michigan, does Ryan Day survive it? And so, I mean, I honestly, I think that he is safer than most people think. I mean, first of all, you have a huge buyout. Secondly, his winning percentage at Ohio State is, he's the best winning percentage in this century of anybody. And the teams he's lost to have all been great teams. He's never lost to a bad team or, a team that he definitely shouldn't have lost to. The Michigan teams are the three best teams that Michigan's had in forever. So, Ross Bjork's the new AD. Obviously, new ADs typically don't mind bringing in their own people, but I don't think Ross Bjork has an own people. I mean, there's nobody that. And the other thing is Ryan Day has in every other way represented Ohio State very well. I mean, he did no personal scandals. He's considered a good guy. Players love him. He's well liked inside the Woody Hayes Center. I mean, like if they have a disappointing year and they lose to Michigan at home, then I think all bets are off. But assuming that, I think they could lose to Michigan again. I don't think they will, but for the sake of this argument, they could lose to Michigan, win the Big Ten anyway, or make a deep playoff run, and he'll be okay. But the other part, about that buyout, there's going to be a lot of belt tightening in athletic departments around the country in the light of the House decision and the money they're going to have to pay out. And, to have $30 or $40 million to say, okay, goodbye to a coach who's won 86% of his games, that's, from a financial point of view, that's a pretty tough sell. And again, all the other factors that would cause Ryan Day to be pretty safe are there.
The other factor to keep in mind is in this era of college football, if you were going to make a coaching change, you invite a lot of roster turnover.
Exactly. Jim Harbaugh lost 5 in a row to Ohio State, right? He started off losing 5 in a row.
But it does certainly feel like the stakes are high, just in terms of going into this year between the rivalry stakes. It's an expanded Big Ten, and there's expectation about trying to get back for Ohio State at the top of the league, and then just the expanded college football playoff. And we just don't know really how the sport will function in December and January. Now, what type of style of play gets rewarded in a 3-game, 4-game playoff structure? What's the best route to winning? I mean, these are all questions that we'll kind of get a sense of this new format as things go on, but you just don't know what type of things will get rewarded when you have a playoff so big.
And what's funny is that we had to do kind of a playoff prediction thing, and the thing that kind of struck me when I tried to do it, and I didn't spend a ton of time on it, but here's a little bold prediction. I think it's assuming Ohio State, let's just say for the sake of argument, they win the Big Ten, they would get one of the top 4 seeds, obviously, conference champions get those. I think their quarterfinal game will be tougher than their semifinal game because you're looking at a Big 12 that's been weakened by the loss of Texas and Oklahoma, or an ACC that, Florida State's already lost. Who's it going to be? Miami, Clemson. I don't think any of those teams now strike fear the way they used to. So let's say Ohio State's number 1 or number 2, they're going to play a 7 to 10 seed. Those could be pretty tough teams. Whereas I think the Big 12 champion, I think I picked Utah, which again, I'm trying to remember who's where, Utah's in the Big 12 now. It could be Kansas State. Wouldn't that be funny?
I picked Kansas State to be one of my top.
Imagine that. That'd be fun. Could be Syracuse. How about that? Kyle McCord.
They avoid Florida State and Clemson in the regular season, so crazier things, I guess, could happen.
But I just think the quarterfinal game, assuming, for whoever the Big Ten champion is going to be a tougher game than the semifinal game is going to be. Now, that's assuming that Ohio State or the Big Ten and the SEC are 1-2. Mm-hmm. But I don't. That's just kind of struck me. It's like, okay, who's going to win the Big 12? You have Texas and Oklahoma aren't in it. Nobody strikes fear in you.
Yeah. It'll be. There are all sorts of. It's funny just seeing the word bracketology now thrown out with college football. It's such a basketball.
Oh God, I did that for a few years. I did that back. This is like 15 years ago before I was on this beat. Oh, yeah, I love doing it because I love college basketball, but what a pain in the, that was such a pain. At least if this is 12 and not 64.
Yeah, you're not trying to pick who wins the Colonial League and whether they'll be in the play-in game or who wins
Old
the Big
Dominion,
West
or whoever it was.
bid thieves and all that.
Yeah.
You can't wait until the bid thief makes it in the lexicon in college football and in some
Yeah.
fashion.
Bubble teams, we have bubble teams all the time.
Yeah, bubble watch. If Ohio State gets 2 losses, are they on bubble watch?
Right. And look, we've talked plenty about Ohio State having 3 legitimately tough games. Oregon, at Penn State, and Michigan. Iowa could give them a run. I mean, I don't think Nebraska is going to be a pushover this year. I mean, Dylan Raiola is a freshman, but he's obviously a talented guy, and I think Matt Rule's got that program going in the right direction. I don't think they're ready to beat Ohio State, but
it feels like a hard out game, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, they've had their struggles with Nebraska at times. Sometimes they've blown them out, and other times it's been a struggle. So, but then I look at the others. Indiana, I don't see that happening. Michigan State, I don't see that. If they had played Rutgers, that might have been an interesting game. I mean, it was last year, and Greg Schiano's got that program, on the right track. So they don't play Wisconsin. Purdue should not challenge them. So you got some gimmies in the Big Ten, I think, and obviously non-conference. But you do have 3 tough games.
Yeah, I mean, your draw for as much as we're going to knock their non-conference schedule over the next couple of weeks, and frankly, I think that
it's knockable.
The conference schedule is tough because there are essentially 5 teams who are considered by the consensus top 5 in the Big Ten. It's Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, or Iowa. That 5 group, and among that 5 group, Ohio State is the only one of them playing the others. So their schedule in conference is very top heavy. And to go through Big Ten play and survive all those will be no small feat. And even to win the league will be no small feat. So I think that's important to keep in mind is there's September, that is a row of cupcakes. But October is a meat grinder where they have Iowa at Oregon, you have a bye, and then you play Nebraska, and then at Penn State. Penn State's technically a couple days into November. But that month-long stretch, I think, is very formidable and will be very challenging for them because you're going to play at Austin Stadium and at Beaver Stadium. Those are 2 of the tougher venues in college football. So they will certainly the schedule will get more difficult as the leaves change color here. Bill, before we go, we've sort of previewed the season at large, but we should pay some lip service to Ohio State's season opening game against Akron and the Zips, who will zip down I-70 to come to the Horseshoe.
No, where?
I-71. I-71.
Jeez.
I
California boy.
I goofed up my own play on words there.
Well, Akron has beaten Ohio State. They beat them in, 1894 or something like that.
103 years, I think, was it was brought
whatever year it was. Yeah, that was the infancy of Ohio State football. Akron took it to the Buckeyes, but I don't look. They're not. They're 50-point underdogs. I'm curious to see how Will Howard plays. I'm curious to see some of the newcomers. How good is Quinshon Judkins? Excited to see the defense. Are they really just going to be lights out? If this is a game at halftime, if it's anything less than, let's say, 21 points at halftime, I'll be surprised. But that's why they play the games, right? I mean, it is the first game. First games are always a little weird, but being as veteran a team as this is, other than obviously a new quarterback, I don't expect to have the kind of hiccups that you had like last year. Indiana, that was a bad game. I mean, the offense at least, they struggled.
There's almost some weird things from the jump. You look back at Indiana's game last year. I mean, IU came out in an option offense, right? Because you haven't played since last year, so teams always have the chance to install some funky stuff in camp, but that usually only lasts a couple series, and I would expect that whatever wrinkles Akron might throw out. To get a sense of the profile of Akron, I wrote 3 keys to watch for the game. So some of this is 3 keys for how Ohio State could beat Akron. You do wonder how they could do it, but it sort of gave me a chance to get a little bit of a crash course early in the week. It's funny because Joe Moorhead's the head coach, and his background as an offensive guy. I mean, he's one of the early adopters of the RPO. You've seen those throughout college football. Well, Moorhead's the guy who helped bring them to Penn State and really helped popularize them on this level of college football after running it at Fordham. And Ohio State fans don't need a long memory to remember when he was the offensive coordinator at Oregon in 2021. They came to Ohio Stadium and won that game. But Akron's offense has been no good since he's.
That's your expert analysis. No good.
They have been bad.
Oh, good. Zips is the right nickname.
Zip. Zip is about it. But the defense has actually been fairly decent. They haven't given up a lot of yards per play. The quarterbacks have not a high completion percentage against them. They have a lot of returners in the front seven. So if you are looking for how this game is not going to be much of a measuring stick for Ohio State as far as sort of like where things stand in certain position groups and all that. But I do think it's relatively interesting for the offensive line just because Akron does have some guys up front who can get to the quarterback, and they have a good front seven. So I think the thing to watch for is if Ohio State's offensive line struggles, it certainly would not be a welcome sight for you. But if you see them holding their own, it's, I think, maybe encouraging to on some small degree. That's my sense of things.
3 years ago when Ohio State played Akron, it was notable for, well, really one reason. It was 59-7, but Ohio State had a player quit in the middle of the game. That was, Kayvon Pope kind of stormed off the field, and that was, interesting. That was the only thing people will probably remember about that. Well, other than the fact that was Kyle McCord's start, right? That was the game he started. Am I right about that?
You were right. That was Kyle McCord's start. CJ Stroud had an injured shoulder, and they finally relinquished to resting him. And Kyle McCord started. And remember at that time of the year, Ohio State fans were hard enough on CJ Stroud that they actually wanted Kyle McCord to start over this. At least some people on the internet who are Ohio State fans wanted that to happen. And McCord did enough that game to put them in fine shape, but you probably saw the difference in those two quarterbacks at that stage. What did back to Kayvon Pope? He also tweeted, I think, during the game. He quit the team. He walked off the field, and he also tweeted some things.
Good luck, misspelled, to my teammates, and F Ohio State. And I think we don't need the other letters in that word. So it was not a fun party. That was. I didn't actually see that at the time. I'm covering the game. I've got a few things going on at once. I got to write. I got to watch. I got whatever. So I didn't actually see it until later. And I was like, "Oh my God, you really did that?"
Yeah, I don't remember. I remember CJ Barnett escorting him to the locker room. Yes. I didn't see the whole fuss on the sideline, but then you saw him being escorted off. It was unusual.
There was gloves in the stands.
Yeah, that was one of the highlights.
Well, hopefully nobody will quit during the game.
That was one of the more memorable things that happened in that Akron game.
Yeah. So I don't expect that kind of drama on Saturday. It'll be fun to be in the shoe of the weather. It's supposed to be hot, mid-80s, but not what it is right now, which is high 90s, which is good. I mean, when it's that hot, it's not pleasant for anybody. So at least it'll be warm, and I'll have to take some precautions. But mid-80s is certainly not a big deal.
Plus Archie without the eye at halftime.
That's actually is probably the high. I can't believe it. And Joey has a great story on Archie and his legacy, and even Ryan Day, unprompted, brought it up today and talked about. Everyone says this about Archie: as great a player as he was, he's a better guy. I mean, it's kind of like a cliche at this point, but I mean, I don't know him well, but I know him a little bit, and every time I've seen him, he couldn't be more gracious. And I do think that most of the fondness that Buckeye Nation has for him is because of that, because everyone knows that he's a really genuinely good guy. And the Heisman Trophy stuff is a bonus. I mean, obviously he's unique in college football history for being the only two-time winner. But, if he were just kind of another guy, he'd be thought of fondly, but not revered the way he is. So yes, I think there are probably more people that are going to go get concessions in the second quarter than will at halftime, and wisely so.
Yeah, that'll be a neat feat because he's really the first true player to get to have the honor of dotting the I. Woody Hayes did it, Earl Bruce did it, and as Bill mentioned, Earl was a freshman football player. So Archie would be the first varsity player to have the honor of dotting the I. Jack's done it, John Glenn, but never like an Ohio State football player getting.
Funny when you think about it. I mean, you think about, guys like, Hopalong Cassidy. I mean, was in town and a legend. And I mean, Vic Janowitz won the Heisman. It's kind of, I mean, the Archie makes sense. I mean, I'm not saying that. I mean, he certainly makes sense. I mean, the cliche about Mount Rushmore. If there is a Mount Rushmore, he's on it.
Yeah. No, that'll be a neat thing. He's also going to be the first player to have a statue, or first anybody to have a statue outside Ohio Stadium. So I think this is certainly will be a cool weekend for some of that stuff from just the history of it all, and getting to see some of that. They have a statue, obviously, of Woody outside the facility, but this is the first statue up outside the horseshoe. It'll be in the rotunda in that part of the stadium. So certainly I think that'll be a neat thing for people coming to the game, either whether it's Akron or Western Michigan the following week or at some other point down the line. Is you'll go to the rotunda, people get to take their photos there. There's now the historical marker for the shoe turning 100. Now there'll be an Archie statue in that area.
Yep.
So
all right. Well, I think we probably more than covered.
We packed a lot in for week one, but certainly no shortage of things as the season gets underway, and you'll certainly hear from us after the game when we'll see. We'll report back at first online what happens, and then we'll certainly deliver some podcast fodder for your feeds, whether you subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you like to listen to the podcast. I'm Joey Kaufman. That was Bill Rabinowitz. Thanks for listening to the Buckeye Extra Football Podcast, and stay tuned through us throughout the football season. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.